Hello everyone following this story. If you're enjoying the content, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more exciting narratives like this one. Now let's dive into this intriguing tale of family, betrayal, and redemption. The crystal glass clinked against the rim of the flute as the waiter poured champagne for the trio seated at the most exclusive table in Le Ciel, the most elegant restaurant in São Paulo. Jack Callahan, a 68-year-old man with impeccably cut grey hair and sharp blue eyes, raised his glass for a toast. To new beginnings, he said, a smile revealing his perfectly aligned teeth. 58 million reasons to celebrate. Kevin Callahan, 37 and Jack's only son, returned the smile, though it didn't quite reach his brown eyes. Beside him, Brenda, his 32-year-old wife, discreetly adjusted the pearl necklace around her slender neck, her long, elegant fingers adorned with perfectly manicured nails. To your retirement, Dad, Kevin said, lifting his glass, and to the future of the Callahan family. The restaurant shimmered with understated elegance. Crystal chandeliers cast a golden glow over tables draped in snow-white linens. Waiters in sharp suits glided between tables like silent specters, attuned to every unspoken need of the guests. Jack watched his son as he sipped his champagne. It was hard to believe it had been nearly 4 decades since he held that tiny bundle in the hospital, vowing to give Kevin everything he never had. And now, after selling his logistics company built from the ground up, he would finally fulfill that promise completely. So, Dad, have you figured out what you're going to do with all that money? Kevin asked, keeping his tone casual as the waiter served the first course. Jack smiled, placing the linen napkin over his lap. I have a few ideas, but today isn't a day for business talk. It's a day for celebration. Brenda leaned slightly forward, her black dress subtly revealing her décolletage. Jack, you deserve this moment. Elysia would be so proud. Her voice was as soft as velvet when she mentioned Jack's late wife. A flicker of pain crossed the businessman's face at the sound of his wife's name. It had been 3 years since she passed, and the hurt was still fresh. Thank you, Brenda. I think she would be. As dinner continued, Jack noticed the way Kevin and Brenda exchanged glances when they thought he wasn't watching. There was something in those looks, a silent communication that stirred a slight discomfort in his chest. I think I'll order a cranberry juice, Jack said, gesturing to the waiter. This wine is too strong for my heart today. Kevin straightened up immediately. Heart problems again, Dad? I thought the doctors said everything was under control. It's fine. I just prefer not to overdo it today. Jack observed how his seemingly casual comment had sparked a reaction in his son. Interesting. The juice arrived in an elegant glass. Jack sipped, enjoying the tart flavor of the fruit. Conversation flowed naturally as they savored exquisite dishes. But something in Kevin's behavior continued to bother Jack. There was a nervous energy in him that didn't fit the festive occasion. When Jack stood up to head to the restroom, he didn't notice how Kevin's eyes followed him, nor how his son discreetly adjusted the sleeve of his blazer, revealing for a moment the tip of a small vial. Marcus Oliveira, the restaurant's head of security, was positioned discreetly near the bar, his trained eyes scanning the environment constantly. Years as a police officer before moving into private security had taught him to detect suspicious behavior, and something at the Callahan table had caught his attention. When Jack returned to the table, Marcus watched with growing interest as Kevin leaned in to hug his father, seemingly spilling his napkin. As he bent down to pick it up, his right hand moved quickly over Jack's juice glass. The movement was quick, almost imperceptible, but not to Marcus, whose years of training had prepared him to notice exactly this type of furtive behavior. Jack Callahan's world froze at the moment Marcus, the security guard, approached him discreetly from behind and whispered in his ear, "Sir, I don't want to alarm you, but I saw your companion put something in your drink while you were away." Jack maintained a neutral expression, years of tough negotiations having taught him to control his reactions. He nodded imperceptibly, thanked the guard with a nearly invisible movement of his head, and turned his attention back to the table. Kevin and Brenda were animatedly discussing their plans to renovate the vacation home, as if nothing had happened. Jack glanced at the ruby-red juice glass in front of him, the drink that his own son had tampered with. "You won't believe this," Jack began, his voice perfectly controlled. "I just ran into Roberto Menezes in the bathroom. Remember him, Kevin? The investor who helped us at the beginning of the company." Kevin seemed momentarily confused. "Oh yeah, of course. How is he?" "Great. He sends his regards." Jack smiled, knowing that Roberto Menezes was a fictitious person he had just made up. The ease with which Kevin pretended to remember him confirmed his suspicions. Jack raised his glass, pretending to drink, but at the last second, his arm accidentally knocked against the glass, spilling juice across the table. "Oops, how clumsy of me," he exclaimed as the red liquid spread over the white tablecloth. With quick movements, Jack used his napkin to soak up some of the spilled liquid, taking care to saturate it well with the juice. Discreetly, he folded the napkin and tucked it into the inner pocket of his blazer as waiters rushed to clean the table. "Sorry about that," Jack said, feigning embarrassment. "No problem, Dad," Kevin quickly replied, his face betraying a mix of disappointment and concern. "Do you want me to order another juice for you?" No. I think I've had enough for today." Jack placed his hand over his chest and grimaced in discomfort. "Actually, I'm not feeling too well. Maybe it's best if I head home." Brenda immediately leaned in, her face a mask of worry. "Jack, we can take you. Our car is right outside." Jack shook his head. "Don't worry. I've already called an Uber. You two stay and enjoy dessert. The night is still young for you both." "Are you sure, Dad?" "I don't mind taking you," Kevin insisted, partially rising from his chair. "Absolutely. I'd rather not ruin your night." Jack smiled, maintaining his composure as he stood up. "By the way, I'm thinking about setting up a family trust with part of the sale proceeds. Something to secure the future of the Callahans. We can talk about it next week." Kevin's eyes briefly sparkled with what could be interpreted as relief or greed. "Sure, Dad, whenever you want." Jack squeezed the soaked napkin in his pocket as he walked out of the restaurant. On his way, he paused briefly where Marcus was positioned. "Thank you," he said softly. "You may have just saved my life. I'd like to talk more. Here's my business card." The guard nodded discreetly, taking the card. "It's my job, sir. I hope you'll be all right." In the Uber on the way home, Jack gazed out the window at the city lights, while his hand rested over the pocket holding the evidence. It wasn't tears that blurred his vision, but a cold, clear determination. His own son had tried to kill him. Now, Jack needed to find out why. The private lab occupied the third floor of a discreet building in the business district. Jack had known Dr. Rodriguez for 20 years. The man had conducted chemical analyses for his company in cases of product contamination. If anyone could identify what was in the juice without asking unnecessary questions, it was him. "How long will it take?" Jack asked, handing over the carefully preserved napkin in a plastic bag. Dr. Rodriguez, a man in his 50s with thin-framed glasses and a pristine white lab coat, examined the material. "For a complete analysis?" 48 hours. "But I can give you preliminary results by tomorrow." Jack nodded. "Make it as thorough as possible. Cost isn't an issue." As he drove home, Jack called a number he rarely used but always kept updated in his contacts. "Cynthia, it's Jack. We need to talk. It's urgent." Cynthia Walsh was in her office when Jack arrived, even though it was nearly midnight. At 53, she was one of the most respected attorneys in the city, known for her sharp intellect and impeccable discretion. The daughter of Thomas Walsh, Jack's late partner. She was practically family. "It must be serious for you to call me at this hour," she said, gesturing to the armchair across from her mahogany desk. Jack sat heavily. "Kevin tried to kill me tonight." Cynthia froze, the teacup she was holding halting midway to her lips. "Jack, that's a very serious accusation." "I know. That's why I'm here." Jack recounted the events of the evening in clinical detail, devoid of emotion. as if discussing a corporate fraud case rather than an attempted patricide. When he finished, Cynthia set her teacup on the table and interlaced her fingers. "I assume you don't want to involve the police, or you would have gone to the station instead of my office." Jack nodded. "You know me well. If this goes public, it will destroy the legacy of the company. It will tarnish Alicia's memory. And frankly, I can't bear to see my own son handcuffed in a courtroom. So what do you want, Jack?" "I want to know why. And then I want justice on my terms." His eyes, usually warm, were hard as blue stones. "I need your help to investigate discreetly and to plan my response once we know everything." Cynthia studied him for a long moment. "Are you sure about this? Once we start digging, there's no going back from what we uncover." Jack stared out the window at the city lights. "My son tried to kill me today, Cynthia. There's no going back from that." In the following days, Jack played the role of his life. He called Kevin, casually mentioning that he had only experienced indigestion that night. He talked enthusiastically about his plans for the family trust, observing how his son's voice brightened with each mention of amounts and conditions. Meanwhile, the private investigators hired by Cynthia began to unearth secrets Jack never imagined. "They're completely broke," Cynthia said, spreading financial reports across her desk 3 days later. "Kevin and Brenda have over $2 million in debt. Overdue mortgages, high-interest loans, maxed-out credit cards." Jack examined the documents, his heart heavy. "How is this possible? I pay Kevin a generous salary at the company. Apparently, it's not enough for the lifestyle they lead. The mansion in Jardim Europa, the apartment in Paris, luxury cars, constant trips." Cynthia pointed to surveillance photos showing Kevin and Brenda entering casinos, high-end stores, exclusive restaurants. "They're spending like they already have their inheritance." Jack's eyes landed on a folder marked Alicia Collection. "What's this?" Cynthia hesitated before opening it. "This was the hardest part to uncover, Jack. Inside were photographs of the valuable art collection that Alicia, Jack's late wife, had amassed throughout her life. Recent photos taken inside Jack's house while he was traveling. "Brenda has been contacting art galleries for the past 2 months," Cynthia explained softly. "She's trying to arrange private sales of the works. She told the gallery owners that you're on the brink of death and that she's organizing affairs discreetly." Jack felt as if he'd been punched in the stomach. Those paintings were Alicia's legacy, his connection to the woman he had loved for 4 decades. "There's more," Cynthia continued, opening another folder. "Kevin forged a medical power of attorney that gave him access to your medical records. He's been extensively researching your specific heart condition." She slid over prints of internet search histories. "How to induce heart attack, undetectable drugs in autopsies, metoprolol tartrate overdose effects. The lab results came back this morning," Cynthia said, handing over a final report. "The substance in your juice was metoprolol tartrate at a concentration 25 times above the normal therapeutic dose, enough to cause a fatal heart attack in someone with your condition." Jack stared at the documents, a storm of emotions crossing his face. Anger, sadness, betrayal, shock, all vying for dominance. "What do you want to do now, Jack?" Cynthia asked gently. Jack lifted his gaze, a cold resolve forming within him. "Schedule a meeting. Tell them it's to sign the trust documents. We'll give Kevin and Brenda exactly what they deserve." The conference room in Cynthia's office was set up like any important business meeting. Mineral water in crystal pitchers, elegant notepads, personalized pens. But this was no ordinary meeting, and the meticulously arranged folders on the table didn't contain documents about trust funds. Jack arrived an hour early, reviewing the strategy with Cynthia. His face was marked by the fatigue of sleepless nights, but his eyes were clear and determined. "Are you sure about this?" Cynthia asked one last time. "We can still go to the police." Jack shook his head. "My decision is made. We'll stick to the plan." At 10 o'clock sharp, the secretary announced Kevin and Brenda's arrival. They entered the room radiating anticipation, impeccably dressed like executives about to close the deal of their lives. "Dad!" Kevin rushed to hug Jack, who accepted the gesture without reciprocating. "You look great." "That discomfort at the restaurant seems to have passed, apparently." "Yes, son. I'm feeling enlightened." Jack gestured to the chairs. "Please, have a seat. We have a lot to discuss today." Brenda smiled, her eyes quickly scanning the table for the documents that would change their lives. "Jack, we're so excited about this meeting. It's an important moment for the Callahan family." "Indeed it is," Jack agreed, sitting next to Cynthia. "Before we get into the official papers, there are a few preliminary matters we need to address." Cynthia opened the first folder in front of her. "As the attorney for Mr. Callahan, I need to clarify a few points." Her voice was professional, devoid of emotion. "First, I'd like to confirm that both of you are here voluntarily and understand that this meeting is being recorded for legal purposes." Kevin frowned slightly. "Recorded? Is that really necessary for a family matter?" "Absolutely necessary," Jack replied. "Please answer Dr. Walsh's question." Kevin and Brenda exchanged quick glances before nodding. "Yes, we're here voluntarily," Kevin said. "Excellent." Cynthia slid a document across the table. "This is the report from an independent forensic laboratory. It analyzes a substance found on a napkin from the Le Ciel restaurant last Monday night." The color began to drain from Kevin's face as he looked at the document without touching it. "The substance," Cynthia continued, "was identified as metoprolol tartrate at a lethal concentration, 25 times the normal therapeutic dose." She opened another folder. "Here is the signed testimony from Mr. Marcus Oliveira, head of security at Le Ciel, stating that he saw Mr. Kevin Callahan add an unidentified substance to his father's drink while he was away from the table." Brenda grabbed Kevin's arm, her perfectly manicured nails digging into the expensive fabric of his blazer. "Kevin, what is she talking about?" But Kevin was silent, his face now completely pale. Jack leaned forward. "My own son tried to poison me, Brenda. He tried to kill me to get his hands on my fortune. This is absurd." Brenda finally found her voice. "Jack, you can't believe this. There must be some mistake." Cynthia continued relentlessly, opening another folder. "Here's a detailed financial summary of the Callahan couple's finances. $2,300,000 in debt. 3 overdue mortgages. 7 maxed-out credit cards. Loans from known loan sharks." She turned to another folder. "Transcripts of Mrs. Brenda Callahan's calls to 5 different art galleries over the last 2 months, trying to discreetly sell the late Mrs. Elysia Callahan's art collection, claiming that Mr. Jack Callahan was terminal and that she was organizing his affairs." Brenda paled, her mouth opening and closing without a sound. "And finally," Cynthia said, opening the last folder, "forged medical documents, including a falsified medical power of attorney, giving Kevin unrestricted access to his father's medical records, along with a detailed history of internet searches on how to induce heart attacks in patients with Mr. Callahan's specific condition." The silence that followed was heavy as lead. Kevin stared blankly at the table, while Brenda appeared on the verge of a breakdown. "Why?" Jack's voice broke the silence, laden not with anger, but deep sorrow. "I've always given you everything, Kevin. What did I do to deserve this?" Kevin finally lifted his gaze, tears in his eyes. "You don't understand. We were desperate. The debts, the creditors threatening. We needed the money now, not when you decided to die naturally." "So you decided to speed up the process," Jack said, his voice dangerously calm. "It was a moment of weakness," Kevin tried to argue. "I wasn't thinking clearly." "A moment of weakness doesn't involve forging documents, researching lethal drugs, and meticulously planning your own father's murder," Jack replied. "It was premeditated and calculated." The confrontation in the conference room had reached its critical point. Kevin looked desperately at Brenda, who kept her eyes fixed on the table, unable to meet Jack's accusing gaze. What will happen now? Kevin finally asked, his voice barely a whisper. Are you going to turn us into the police? Jack exchanged a look with Cynthia before responding. I have two options for you. He stood up, walking slowly around the room, his hands clasped behind his back. The first option is simple. I present all this evidence to the authorities. Attempted murder, forgery, conspiracy. Considering the clear premeditation, we're talking maximum sentences. You'll spend the next 15 to 20 years in prison. Kevin paled even further if that was possible. Brenda began to cry silently. The second option, Jack continued, stopping behind them, is this. He gestured to Cynthia, who slid two contracts across the table. These documents stipulate that you renounce any future claims to my inheritance. You'll relinquish the house you live in, whose mortgage I've already paid off, by the way, and disappear from my life forever. You can take only one suitcase each, with basic personal belongings. In exchange, I won't file criminal charges. You're leaving us destitute, Brenda whispered, incredulous. I'm giving you what you never gave me, a chance, Jack corrected. You're both young, educated, perfectly capable of building your own lives without relying on my money. He leaned in between them, his voice low but firm. You tried to take everything from me, my life, my legacy, even the memories of my wife through her art, yet I'm offering more mercy than you'd ever receive in any court. Kevin swallowed hard. And our debts? Not my problem, Jack replied coldly. Maybe it's time for you to learn to live within your means. The silence that followed was heavy. Finally, Kevin picked up a pen with trembling hands. We don't have a choice, do we? We always have choices, son. You made yours when you put poison in my juice. Now you're facing the consequences. One by one, the documents were signed. When they finished, Cynthia collected the papers, carefully checking each signature before nodding at Jack. You have 24 hours to leave the house, she said, her voice professional again. A bailiff will be present to ensure that only basic personal items are removed, as stipulated in the agreement. Kevin and Brenda stood up, looking smaller and more fragile than when they entered the room. At the door, Kevin stopped and turned to his father. I'm sorry, he said, his voice breaking. Not for what we did, but for getting caught. You never understood the pressure you put on those around you, the constant expectation of perfection. Jack stared at his son, seeing not only the recent betrayal, but decades of choices that had led them to this moment. Maybe I've failed as a father in many ways, Kevin, but nothing justifies what you tried to do. As the door closed behind the couple, Jack sank into his chair, suddenly feeling every bit of his 68 years. Are you all right? Cynthia asked, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. No, he admitted. But I will be. He took a deep breath. We still have work to do. In the following days, Jack worked tirelessly with Cynthia to completely reorganize his affairs. His will was rewritten, bank accounts transferred, assets reallocated. A week after the confrontation, he signed the final documents that transferred all his wealth, 58 million reais, to the newly established Elysia Callahan Foundation, an irrevocable charity dedicated to funding young artists and environmental preservation projects, the two causes his wife had supported most in life. Are you sure about this, Jack? Cynthia asked, watching him sign the last document. You're literally giving up everything. Jack smiled, the first genuine smile in weeks. On the contrary, Cynthia, I'm finally doing something meaningful with it. Money is just paper if it doesn't have purpose. 3 months had passed since that fateful meeting. The mansion Kevin and Brenda had inhabited was now for sale, the funds destined for the Elysia Callahan Foundation. The tabloids speculated about the sudden disappearance of the Callahan heir, but Jack didn't feed the rumors. For the inevitable questions, there was only one concise answer. My son chose to go his own way. On an autumn afternoon, Jack walked slowly through the newly opened art gallery in the city center. The white walls proudly displayed the work of 10 promising young artists, the Foundation's first initiative. What do you think of this one, Mr. Callahan? asked Marina, the exhibition curator, pointing to a vibrant painting that blended intense colors in almost hypnotic patterns. Jack studied the piece, appreciating the raw energy and undeniable talent behind it. It's extraordinary. Alicia would have loved it. She always said that true art doesn't need to be explained. You feel it here. He pointed to his chest. Marina smiled. The artist is only 19. When we told her she had been selected for the exhibition, she cried. She said she was about to give up on art due to family pressure to pursue a more practical career. And now she has a full scholarship to the best art school in the country, thanks to your foundation. Jack nodded, satisfied. He continued his tour of the gallery, stopping to chat with the young artists who nervously mingled among the guests. In each face he saw hope, ambition, dreams, all that money couldn't buy, but could certainly nurture when applied with purpose. At the end of the exhibition, Jack found himself alone in front of a large window overlooking the adjacent park. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky with the same vibrant colors that adorned the canvases around him. Marcus, the security guard who had prevented his death that night at the restaurant, approached discreetly. Now working as the head of security for the foundation, he maintained the same vigilant posture, but there was a new respect in his eyes when he addressed Jack. "Everything all right, Mr. Callahan?" Jack smiled. "Everything is perfect, Marcus. Thank you." As the guard walked away, Jack turned his gaze back to the horizon. He thought of Kevin and Brenda, wondering where they were now, if they had learned anything from all this. Part of him still hurt when he thought of his son, the unimaginable betrayal, the broken bond that would never be fully restored. But another part, the part that Alicia had always nurtured and encouraged, felt a strange peace. It hadn't been revenge that motivated his final decision, but a genuine desire to transform something terrible into something beautiful and meaningful. A true legacy, Jack thought, wasn't just something passed down to family, but the good one could do in the world. By withdrawing the fortune his son hadn't deserved, he had given Kevin the one thing money truly couldn't buy, the opportunity to build a life based on honest work and character of his own. Cynthia approached, carrying 2 glasses of champagne. "To a successful opening," she said, handing one of the glasses to Jack. "Alicia would be immensely proud." Jack accepted the glass with a gentle smile. "You know what's ironic about all this, Cynthia? Kevin and Brenda wanted my money because they thought it would bring happiness. And now that I've given up everything, I've never felt more fulfilled." "You haven't given up everything," Cynthia corrected. "You've just redirected your resources to something greater than yourself." They watched the room filled with people admiring the artworks, chatting excitedly about the new talents discovered. "I received a letter yesterday," Jack mentioned, his voice low. "From Kevin." Cynthia turned to him, surprised. "What did it say?" "They're in the interior of Minas Gerais. Kevin got a job as an administrative manager at a local company. Brenda is teaching English." Jack took a sip of champagne. He didn't ask for money or forgiveness. He just wanted me to know that they're rebuilding their lives from scratch. "And how do you feel about that?" Jack reflected for a moment. "Relieved, I suppose. Not for them, but for me. I realized I'm no longer carrying anger." A young artist approached timidly, interrupting their conversation. She couldn't be more than 20, with colorful hair and paint-stained hands. "Mr. Callahan, sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to personally thank you. Without the Foundation's scholarship, I could never continue my studies." Jack smiled warmly. "The talent is yours, young lady. The Foundation just removes the obstacles in your path." As the artist walked away, Jack felt a wave of emotion he hadn't expected. In his nearly 70 years, after building a business empire from scratch, raising a son, and nearly losing everything, he finally understood what Alicia had always tried to show him, that the true purpose of success wasn't to accumulate, but to empower. It wasn't to possess, but to enable. "I'll take a walk in the garden," Jack told Cynthia, handing her the champagne glass. I need a moment alone." The garden of the gallery was tranquil, softly illuminated by indirect lights. Jack sat on a bench under an ancient tree, its gnarled trunk strong like life itself. Imperfect, but resilient, he closed his eyes, and for a moment he felt Elysia's presence beside him, as he had so many times since her passing. It wasn't a supernatural sensation, just the deep connection that two lives intertwined for decades build. An echo that remains even when one voice falls silent. "You were right, my love," he whispered to the gentle breeze. As always, Jack breathed in the fragrant air of the garden. Kevin's betrayal had been the worst pain of his life, but it had also been the catalyst for his greatest act of meaning. There was a strange symmetry in that, a harmony that only becomes visible when we look at the larger patterns of life. When he returned to the gallery, there was a new determination in his steps. The man who had nearly died from greed was now living with purpose. The businessman who had built an empire to leave to his son was now creating a legacy for talented strangers. The pain hadn't completely disappeared, perhaps it never would, but it had been transformed into something that healed rather than hurt. "Are you okay?" Cynthia asked when he returned. Jack nodded, his eyes clear and serene. "More than okay. I'm exactly where I'm meant to be." As he watched the exhibition unfold around him, Jack Callahan felt at peace. It wasn't the ending he had envisioned for his story, but it was a much more meaningful beginning than he could have ever planned. If you enjoyed this story about transformation and redemption, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Leave your like and comment on what you thought. Your reactions are essential for more stories like this to reach you. Thank you for following The Price of Ambition until the end.